Hi friends, welcome back to Hebraic Creations. Last time I said we would look at what it means to observe the Torah. The question arises whether or not we should stone bad people or sacrifice animals. I used to think these were the parts of the Torah that had become obsolete with Yeshua's death and resurrection. But consider Yeshua's own words in Matthew chapter 5 verses 17 to 18. Do not think that I have come to destroy the law or the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the Torah till all is fulfilled. In other words, as long as we have earth and sky, every bit of the law of Moses still stands. Yeshua's death and resurrection fulfilled prophetic shadow pictures, but did not wipe away any of the Torah. There's a 119 ministry video I recommend called Animal Sacrifices in Light of Messiah. In it, they address the misconception that animal sacrifices were made to give people total forgiveness, when in reality, it was just a temporary ritual purification practice. That's in Hebrews 1 through 4 and Hebrews 9, verses 13 to 14. Ron Dudek explains this in his article, Did Animal Sacrifices Remove Sin?, posted on answersingenesis.org on June 5th, 2013. He says, animal sacrifices could only cover sin. They could not remove it. These animals were shadow pictures of Yeshua who could take away sin. Remember, that's exactly what John the Baptist says when he sees Yeshua. It's interesting that after healing a leper, Yeshua tells the guy to show himself to the priest and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded. That's in Mark chapter 1, verse 40 to 44. Some argue Yeshua wouldn't have done that after his death and resurrection. However, the disciples went to the temple and made sacrifices too after Yeshua's resurrection. That's in Acts chapter 3, verse 1, and Acts 21, verse 26. Also, Paul references temple service, meaning animal sacrifice system, to support a point he is making, insinuating that sacrifices were still a valid part of spiritual oblations. That's in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 13 through 14. Also, Paul spends an awful lot of time differentiating between Yeshua's heavenly Melchizedek priesthood and earthly Levitical priesthood that's returning in the millennium, when sacrifices will be done again as a memorial to Yeshua's sacrifice. In Jeremiah 33, verse 20 to 22, Jehovah specifically says the priesthood who ministers or sacrifices to him would continue as long as there was night and day. That's not just figuratively either, as some think, if you take into consideration Ezekiel chapters 40 through 46, which gives extensive details about a future rebuilt temple and animal sacrifices, supposedly in the millennium. But that could be sooner than we think, considering reports coming out of Israel in the last decade of 5 different things I wanted to point out. There are temple utensils, tools, and garments on standby at the Temple Institute in Jerusalem in preparation for renewed sacrifices. Number 2, a reinstated Sanhedrin occurred in 2004 that is scaling up and meeting regularly in Tiberias. Number 3, a mobile altar was dedicated on December 10th, 2018 with a sacrificed animal. Number 4, the ashes of the red heifer are now on hand to purify the third temple. And number 5, there are claims that the third temple could be rebuilt any day. It's also on standby. If animal sacrifice is not abolished, then it stands to reason that the rest of the Torah is not nullified either. Rather, it is all still valid. We cannot cherry pick what parts we want to keep. And if that's true, then we can't dismiss the capital punishment laws either. Consider Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 18 through 21. This passage describes a son who is disobedient, stubborn, a glutton, and a drunkard. The father turns him over to the elders at the city gate, and they stone him to death. If we did this today, I'm pretty certain we would do prison time. Why? Because our country has a judicial system that we are all subject to, right? Another 119 Ministries video I strongly recommend is called Should We Stone Our Children? At this point in my Torah research, I was on the edge of my seat and sweating bullets regarding these revelations about animal sacrifice and capital punishment laws until I recognized that basically there's a biblical system and a sacrificial system with rules to be observed, but only when certain criteria are in effect. Let me run through the 4 criteria. Number 1, the temple is standing and in use, although some say this is optional based on Ezra chapter 3, verse 6. Number 2, there's a functioning Levitical priesthood. And number 3, the people in question are living in Israel. Number 4, there is an active Sanhedrin, which is the highest court of justice and supreme council in ancient Jerusalem, which has now been reestablished. Because all 4 criteria are not in place, we are not able to observe the laws in question. Big sigh of relief, right? However, the laws are still in effect. They are just on pause. To use a 119 Ministries illustration, consider the U.S. driving laws. If all the roads vanished, the driving laws would still be in effect, but on pause till the roads are reinstated. At that point in time, the laws would again apply to licensed drivers. When the Israelites were in Babylon captivity, they couldn't observe much of the law. Even in Israel today, all 4 criteria have not been established, but this is getting closer all the time. And remember that just because animal sacrifice and capital punishment laws are on pause does not mean all the Torah is paused. We are still expected to observe the things that we can, like the Sabbath, the Moedim, and the dietary laws, to name a few. Finally, please note that there are laws that apply to only women, only men, only farmers, only children, only priests, etc. So do keep that in mind. Okay, now let's look at a few scriptures about the judges and witnesses parameters of the capital punishment system that's still in effect but on pause. My prophetic friends will love this. I was totally wrecked the other day when I heard this mentioned in a 119 Ministries video. But the Torah requires 2 to 3 witnesses before a stoning is lawful. Consider the 2 angels of Sodom with Lot. They fulfilled the 2 to 3 witnesses guideline. The angels saw firsthand the city's absolute moral decay, and then judgment came. Lot barely made it out with his family before all the cities of the plain were destroyed. This is Torah capital punishment in action. Judgment rendered on the word of 2 to 3 witnesses. This stoning took the form of brimstone raining down from heaven. Michael Rood has an excellent video on YouTube about these ash-covered ruins in Israel all along the Dead Sea, where millions of sulfur, brimstone, chunks can be seen littering the ground. It's believed that the ruins near Masada's tourism facility is actually ancient Gomorrah. Other sites can be seen on the east and west side of the south end of the Dead Sea. At this point, you may be wondering why Yeshua never stoned anyone. Consider the woman caught in adultery. Some say she wasn't stoned because Yeshua abolished the capital punishment laws, but maybe it was because there was not 2 to 3 true witnesses, and the man was not hauled in for questioning as required in Leviticus 20, verse 10. It's a prerequisite to a stoning. Once again, Yeshua challenged the Pharisees for not observing the Torah properly, and then the mob walked away. Is there any evidence that stoning laws could still be implemented in the future whenever the 4 criteria are reestablished? Well, consider the 2 witnesses in Revelation. They will likely fulfill the Torah requirement that precedes a stoning judgment, because if you read the passages surrounding this, there are fiery, rock-like things coming out of the sky to accompany those 7 trumpet judgments. It sounds like meteors to me. Do you see how this verifies that the entire law of Moses still stands? We'll go into more detail in the future, but there are 3 things, easy things we can start with to observe the Torah. First, Sabbath rest on the 7th day. It starts on Friday at dusk and goes until Saturday evening at dusk. You could observe the Moedim. Passover starts on Wednesday evening on April 8th. It's coming up really soon. And number 3, follow dietary laws. You can start by cutting out pork and shellfish. Okay, so next time we will look at additional validation of the Torah for today from an archaeological and scientific perspective, and consider that meteor possibility. Stay tuned. This is going to blow your mind. Shalom.